The question is, does new atheism as a movement have an Islamophobia problem? I've covered this before, and for those of you who don't know the context, the new atheism movement is essentially the brand of atheism, the popularity of atheism brought about by Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, and Richard Dawkins, these four white guys. So they brought atheism to more of a mainstream narrative in like the height of their careers, through all of these different awesome books that brought a lot of rationalism and scientific, a secular worldview to people who are kind of plagued by the culture of Christianity here in the United States. So it was really valuable in a lot of ways. The new atheism movement was really valuable in a lot of ways. And one thing that there has been a critique in regards to the new atheism movement is whether or not it is too Islamophobic, especially in the wake of the 9/11 attacks in 2001. And so this is something that I have kind of been watching and trying to do my best to educate myself on. And I have a couple of things that I wanted us to look at in order to understand the complexity of this conversation. Because there are many reasons that I personally focus my attention and my criticisms of religion on Christianity, okay? I am an atheist who, as a whole, I think that organized religion, we are at a point in human history in which organized religion causes more harm than it does good. I think it is, on a whole, like bird's eye view, top level, it does hold us back as a species from evolving and progressing and moving forward. I think it is holding us back in a lot of ways. That being said, there is a spectrum of violence when it comes to the nature of specific cultures within religions, okay? For example, equating Quakers with evangelical Christianity is not the same. Quakers are, they promote peace no matter what. They're very tolerant. They're very inclusive, etc. So when it comes to Christianity, the reason that I spend most of my energy critiquing Christianity is several reasons. One, that's how I was raised. I was indoctrinated in the evangelical Christian church. I have a firsthand experience of what that brainwashing looked like and how harmful it can be, both for myself as a person who thought that I needed to subjugate myself for men, as a person who externalized my own accountability for my actions by believing in a savior figure who would atone for all of my sins. Do you understand? There are so many personal harmful beliefs about being raised in the Christian church that I will continue to critique until the day I fucking croak, okay? Another reason, and another thing about that is that those beliefs weren't just harmful to me, but I was 100%, whether I was actively realizing it or not, perpetuating white supremacist narratives, heteronormative supremacist narratives. Do you understand? So my beliefs were in fact harmful to other people. I was raised to be an extremist, a religious extremist. Do you understand? So there are a lot of issues with the upbringing I had. I will not stop critiquing it, period. Another reason I focus on critiquing Christianity as opposed to Islam specifically is because we are in the United States. 62% of people in the United States identify as a Christian of some kind, of some denomination, progressive, conservative, whatever, okay? That is the dominant religion here in the United States. It makes more sense for me to speak truth to power when that is the dominant religion. Okay, I'm not going to argue that. It is more useful for me to critique this system of belief in my hometown, where I can go down any street here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and run into a motherfucking megachurch. I don't know how. We're not the biggest city in the country, but we have so many megachurches. It's insane. It's literally, I'm talking like psycho insane how much of a chokehold evangelical Christianity has in my community. Of course I'm going to fight back and focus my energy there. Also, why do I do this? That's something that I think is really important in this conversation when we're talking about deconstruction from religion, when we're talking about atheism, when we're talking about a secular, humanist, progressive society. Why are we having these conversations? I talk about this all of the time. I don't care how accurate you are with your information if you're not using it to better the lives of individuals, to better the material conditions of the human species. I don't care. I don't care. Okay? So I am doing this. I am having these conversations not because I'm an atheist who is super fucking excited to get to the super correct opinion that there's no God. Like, I can't believe you guys still believe in God. That's so embarrassing for you. Like, fuck that. No, I'm doing this for the version of myself 10 years ago who was just walking away from the chokehold that evangelical Christianity had over me. Okay? I'm doing this for her. I'm doing this for other people who are still in the beginning of their deconstruction journeys, and they don't fucking know what life is about to look like. They are scared that they're about to lose their identity because guess what? They are. Deconstruction of that personal identification with the religious upbringing is an intense experience. I'm doing this. I'm making content. I'm live streaming for them. Okay? I'm also doing this. Okay, another one of my two main reasons I'm doing this is to work toward a more secular, humanist, progressive society, is to build something better. So with that in mind, how useful is it for me to sit here and constantly critique Islam? Now, hold on. There are plenty of issues in Islam that deserve our critique, even though I'm not necessarily a member of that community, right? I wasn't raised as a Muslim, okay? It is not the dominant cultural religion where I'm at in my home city and my home country, okay? There is 100% room to critique any ideology, any belief system, any institution. How many times do I say it is about critiquing the institution or the ideology and not the everyday people? And the main difference between Islamophobia and critiquing Islam is just that. Calling out the belief structures of subjugating women as harmful and violent and unethical. Period, full stop. I'm not changing that perspective. However, one of the pit traps that a lot of ex-Christians can fall into is using rhetoric like all Muslims hate women. Okay? That is Islamophobia, okay? And it is not an accurate picture. There are peaceful Muslims, there are feminist Muslims, there's an entire spectrum of Muslims, just like there are an entire spectrum of Christians. Do you understand? Just like there are an entire spectrum of atheists, some of them being right-wing. Do you understand? So I wanted to bring up a couple of things, a couple of resources to kind of talk about this. This is Britt Hartley, and I love Britt Hartley. I think she is an atheist spiritual director. She's very well educated. She's getting her master's or getting her doctorate in theology. She has a lot of experience with different kinds of religion. She has like a Sufi Muslim spiritual guide. So she's not as removed from Islam as I am. And this is one of her videos. I have two things to share. One of her videos, kind of on one side of perspective here, and then another side of the perspective here that I want to bring up after that.
The most common comment that I get when I'm critiquing religion is that's the culture, not the religion. But here's the thing, different religions create different cultures. So in Christianity, even though you can pull out a few scriptures on equality, you can see how a patriarchal culture would emerge. There's nothing in the religion to stop that. You've got 1 Timothy 2, where women need to be quiet and aren't allowed to teach. You've got Ephesians 5, women submit to your husbands. You have ways and means for a patriarchal culture to emerge from Christianity. Same thing in Islam. You can argue that Islam gave 6th century women more rights than they had before, and you can make that argument. But here's the thing about Islam. It stays in the 7th century. Quran 4:34, men are the protectors and maintainers of women because Allah has made one of them excel over the other.
Wait.
Quran 33:30.
With the video, I have mic feedback. Hold on. Oh.
33, and stay in your houses and do not display yourselves, which has been used to argue that women should. The most common comment that I get when I'm critiquing religion is that's the culture, not the religion. But here's the thing, different religions create different cultures. So in Christianity, even though you can pull out a few scriptures on equality, you can see how a patriarchal culture would emerge. There's nothing in the religion to stop that. You've got 1 Timothy 2, where women need to be quiet and aren't allowed to teach. You've got Ephesians 5, women submit to your husbands. You have ways and means for a patriarchal culture to emerge from Christianity. Same thing in Islam. You can argue that Islam gave 6th century women more rights than they had before, and you can make that argument. But here's the thing about Islam, it stays in the 7th century. Quran 4:34, men are the protectors and maintainers of women because Allah has made one of them excel over the other. Quran 33:33, and stay in your houses and do not display yourselves, which has been used to argue that women should remain indoors and avoid public roles. Quran 2:282, a woman's testimony is worth half of a man's. The death penalty for apostates. I have hundreds of comments from ex-Muslim women saying, thank you for speaking about this. Nobody will speak about this. I can't because I am afraid for my life, or I've been ostracized from my family, or it is dangerous for me. Let's not pretend that that kind of culture pops out equally in every religion. Like non-violent religions like Jain's, that doesn't happen. It's not a thing. It can't arise from their religion. It can't become a cultural thing because Jains have too much doctrine for nonviolence. We don't see ex-Jains as women not being able to speak out for fear of their life. Doesn't happen. It is much harder to produce a patriarchal culture in Sikhism because it was founded in opposition to the caste system and gender discrimination in India. The Baha'i faith specifically teaches the equality of men and women as one of its core principles and allows women to choose. Whereas Islam, you're not allowed to do certain things on your period, and even though that's a mercy, or it's apologists will say that it's a mercy from Allah, it's still also control. Whereas Baha'is will say you choose how you want to participate in this religion and your relationship with God when you're on your period. Totally your choice. You have autonomy over your own body. So the question you have to ask for religions is, why did this culture emerge? Why did, for example, abuse of children happen so rampantly in Catholicism? How did that culture emerge? Why did patriarchy emerge specifically in Christianity and Islam? Why do so few ex-Muslims speak out against their experience for fear of retribution? Why did that culture emerge from that religion? Now, of course, a lot of these things are incredibly complex, and I'll get apologists saying like, yeah, that's not what the scripture meant, or it means this, or you have to consider the context of this. All of that is fine. And there's historical context that you need to consider, but I just think it needs to be at the table. What were the elements of this religion that allowed this culture to arise? Why is it so easy for extreme beliefs within a community? Why is it so easy for people to call that Islam? Why is that easy in this particular culture? Otherwise, you're not validating that cultures come from somewhere, and religion is part of that.
Couple of things that I want to bring up here. I could not find the specific video of hers where she actually shows the receipts of hundreds of comments from Muslim women saying, hey, I can't speak out about this because my life would be threatened, but thank you for speaking out against Islam. I've seen this video of Britt Hartley's, but obviously she's protecting like the privacy of these people who are messaging her, but she shows the receipts of like all of these different comments of Muslim women speaking out to her. Now, the trick with that is, of course, I'm a feminist. Of course, I want the liberation of women everywhere. That includes Muslim women. Of course, I'm going to recognize that an inherently patriarchal belief system like Islam is holding women back. It's holding society back. It's unhealthy. It's immoral. It's all of these things that I have an actual critique with. Now, here is the other element to that I think is important for people in the West to recognize. Now, one of the things that we were talking about in the Discord, in the Kayse and Friends Discord, when we were talking about this, is whether or not this falls under the category of being an apologist for Islam, right? For allowing more space for Islam to be violent and harmful particularly against women, because there's almost this like fear for white people in the United States to critique Islam because it can be so rooted in racism, right? Rooted in this inherent white supremacist narrative. And my only point, hi first time chatter, my only point is that white supremacy and Western imperialism needs to be present in the conversations when it comes to critiquing Islam, because here is the other thing I wanted to show you guys. As you all know, I subscribe to many different newsletters on Substack. I think it is a really great tool for us to get information that is not filtered through the media conglomerates that are backed by the corporate elites. And Reflections of a Muslim Woman is the name of this publication, and how colonialism dehumanized Muslim women. So again, we're still talking about the patriarchy that exists in Islam, in the belief system, but from a perspective of how also in hand with patriarchy, white supremacy is intertwined, okay? And this was a very an impactful article that I read. I hesitated to write this, but the truth had to be told. While researching for my article, Rebuilding After Colonialism, I came across a French website referencing a book that detailed the horrific colonial practices toward Muslim women, supported by authentic historical evidence. Initially unsure whether to delve into these disturbing topics, I recognized the importance of shedding light on what has been erased from history. This article explores the violence and dehumanization of Muslim women during colonial rule, revealing the painful truths that were deliberately hidden. Under colonial rule, the exploitation of indigenous women was not just physical, it was deeply rooted in cultural and religious conflict. Gynecological exams carried out by male doctors became a tool of humiliation, pushing women into positions of submission. Their bodies were treated as subjects of inspection, dehumanizing them in a way that was deeply tied to their identity as Muslim women. For Muslim women, these invasive medical procedures inflicted a trauma that went far beyond the physical violation. In a context where sexual intimacy is reserved for the sacred bond of marriage, forced examinations by male doctors were not merely medical acts, they were a direct assault on the core values of modesty, honor, and religious purity. Such encounters stripped away the privacy and dignity that are central to our identity, deepening the sense of humiliation and cultural desecration. There's another point. These medical practices were about more than just health. They were a means of control. The medical gaze imposed by colonial doctors stripped these women of their humanity, reducing them to their reproductive organs, further reinforcing their status as other in a system built on racial and cultural hierarchy. There's another point that I wanted to... The photographs taken during this time weren't simply documenting, they were reinforcing colonial power. The images of women in these degrading positions, this one, further objectified them. These photos became tools of symbolic violence, cementing the idea that these women were less than human. Hold on, there's more. Okay. Even now, the echoes of that past are evident in how Western narratives and policies continue to marginalize Muslim women. The media often silences our voices, while Western ideals impose definitions of beauty, behavior, and rights that do not always align with our realities. These influences reinforce stereotypes, portraying us as passive or in need of saving, instead of recognizing our resilience and strength. As a Muslim woman, I feel the weight of these historical wounds in my everyday life. Like many of us, I draw strength from the courage of those who came before me. Their struggles remind us that reclaiming our narrative is not only an act of remembrance, it is a powerful step towards asserting our right to self-definition. Self-definition. Okay, and that is my point for bringing up this particular article. I've also read from either this writer or another Muslim woman writer on Substack about how the cultural modesty of Muslim women is not solely, okay, it can be both and, is not solely in response to the patriarchal subjugation of women in Islam as a culture. It is also a direct response to and a resistance against Western immodesty. So the rest of the world, when they look at the United States and they see us in our bikinis and, you know, we're out here on OnlyFans and all of this stuff, when we reach our arm out in an imperialist manner part of, not all, part of the, like, according to this Muslim woman writer, which I didn't find the article ahead of time, part of the reason she wears a hijab, right, is in response to the immodesty of the imperialist regime that is fucking up her life all the way over in the Middle East. Does that make sense? So my point here, a couple of points that I want to make here, on the whole, critiquing Islam, critiquing organized religion, critiquing ideological belief systems that hold the entire species back from a progressive society, that hold women back from their own liberation, all of these things, they are worth critiquing. We can hold criticism of these belief systems. However, to have that conversation without including the imperialist nature of white supremacy as a white woman, I would be painting half of a narrative. I would not be telling the whole story, because it is part of the story. It's both and. It's not specifically colonialist fault, and it's not specifically Muslim men's fault, or, the patriarchal narrative of Islam. Does that make sense? So I was really glad that we brought up a lot of this conversation in my Discord. I really love how insightful you guys are. You guys bring a lot of really interesting perspectives that I hadn't even thought about. But that is the point that I wanted to make as far as whether or not it's actually useful for me to spend a ton of time. Like, I'm happy to have this conversation and bring up, okay, let's talk about Islam really fast. But for me to spend all of my time and energy critiquing Islam, I don't know if it's useful. I'm not saying it's inherently racist to call out a patriarchal system that is actively subjugating women more than Christianity as a whole. Not that Christianity is flawless there. Do you understand that it's a spectrum? Okay. But actively bring, and there also is the criticism to be made that Islam has imperialist tendencies. And I'm not a geopolitical expert. I still have a lot to learn, but I can make space for the imperialist nature of any organized religion, of any strict, rigid belief system that wants to put people in boxes and categories based on their gender, ethnicity, race. Any of that is hand in hand with authoritarianism, which I will always push back against. Again, whenever it comes up in relation to the Middle East, in relation to other organized religions that I didn't grow up in, that are predominantly culturally related to people with a darker skin tone, it is my responsibility to include the component of white supremacist imperialism. That's the point. It's just, if you're going to have that conversation, it's not as easy as it's all bad or it's none of your business. Okay. It's kind of your business and it's pretty bad. Does that make sense?